requires you to support them, but you have to be knowledgeable about the information that you're giving them. You have to be knowledgeable about the requirements. You have to be knowledgeable about what does something mean. For example, I can just give you an example. I was in a certain lab, and somebody made a joke that an auditor went and audited them, and the auditor asked them for MSDS for sputum. So the requirement is the lab should have this information, right? And the ISO 35001 and 15190 for safety and biosecurity, those MSDA sheets are required. It's a requirement. However, you understanding that it is a requirement in this situation and not in this situation is key, because that is what now puts you on a different tangent. That is what puts you on another level from somebody else who is not knowledgeable as you are. So the reason why we are having this class for all this long is that we're going to now look at the requirements in detail, and then we shall look at the different contexts in which they are implemented. I would love this session to be interactive, because I don't want to present while you guys are silent and then at the end you ask questions. No, I'm going to talk over a requirement and then open the discussion. You can talk about how maybe you are addressing it in your lab, or how you've seen other people address it, or how you think you should guide a lab to implement the requirement that you're trying to talk about. So basically, the standard that we are going to look at for the next few weeks is the ISO 15189, which is the medical requirements for the requirements for quality and competence in medical laboratories. This is the 4th edition. When the standard talks about edition, it is talking about the publications. There was the first standard, okay, which was released in 2003, which was the first standard for medical laboratories. They released it, and then the first one was in 1997, 2003, okay. So 2012, they released the 3rd one, and then finally in 2022, which was 2 years ago, they released this version. So that means that they have gone through 4 documents that have been printed for public access. Now, I would like to request, because they are there in the program, when you log into the program for your respective classes, the standards are there in the class. However, it is prohibited to distribute these standards. So I've made them available for you, but I'm going to request that you keep them confidential. They are materials that you should use for your journey and not for distribution among friends and colleagues. Okay. If I can just show you, for those that do not know how much it costs. The standard for medical laboratories costs over. Let me just share my screen. Okay. If my screen comes, you let me know. Okay. So if you type in ISO 15189 2022, the first website that comes is going to be the ISO website. Okay. And when you click on it, you're going to see the cost of this standard. It is a very expensive standard, by the way. So you come to buy, Just accept. You come here on buy, then it is going to give you the figure. So here it says that if you want the PDF only, it is 194 Swiss francs. And when we put that in the thing and then we try to find out how much it is, let me just do into UGX. Okay. You see that it is 812,000. Okay. The people that are in this class are not even paying that amount to get this standard. Some of you are paying 380, some of you are paying 760 at the moment, which is like the discount. We made it even available to the pro users who are only paying like 70 at the moment or 96 after today. So you find that the value you are getting is worth more than what you would have. If you are paying for only the standard, you would pay even more than what you're paying in the class. Okay. So the reason why it is not advised to use, to distribute these standards is because ISO, as the international body that is producing these standards, okay. ISO, as the international body producing these standards, would like to use these standard cells to keep doing the work that they are doing, because the work that they are doing is very crucial for the development of different countries. It is important for us as practitioners in the different fields. So for them to keep in business and to keep supporting the globe at large, it is very important. It is very important that we support them through buying these standards. Okay. So the reason why I raised that is to request you that however much you have access to this standard through this program, kindly don't distribute it, because we also have an obligation to ISO that is producing these standards. So this is the fourth edition. Before ISO releases an edition, which is like the printed version, it can make small changes or small revisions. Okay. And during that period, for example, between 2012 and 2022, which is like 10 years, they were making small incremental revisions in the standard. Okay. However, they were not releasing a new version. So those revisions, you will see them documented as version so and so, or revision so and so, so and so. So this is very important to remember. When you look at the content, previously ISO had 5 clauses. Usually all standards have the same structure. Okay. And wherever you are, I hope you have a notebook and a pen and taking some of these notes, because as an expert, you're supposed to know these things. All standards have the same clause 1, the same structure in terms of the foreword. There is always a foreword. Okay. There is an introduction that talks about that standard. So the foreword talks about ISO as the International Organization for Standardization. Okay. And that is one of the terminologies that you should know as an expert. Some people think that ISO is the same as International Standards Organization, but that is not the case. It is the International Organization for Standardization. Okay. So all standards have a foreword. All standards have an introduction that talks about that specific standard. All standards have a scope. Okay. I hope, oh, sorry, I hadn't yet shared my standard slide. Sorry. Let me first share my standard. So I hope you're all looking at the standard wherever you are. Please, if possible, kindly print it so that while we're going through this class, you can make notes in it. You can, you know, so you can see that the first part of the standard is the foreword. Okay, this is standard for all standards. There is an introduction that talks about that specific standard. Then there is a scope, which tells you how far it is the implementation of this standard. What is meant to be the boundaries of implementation of this standard. In the old version, which was the 2012 version, it was excluding point of care testing. Okay, point of care testing wasn't part of the scope of implementation. However, in this current version, you can see that point of care is now embedded as part of the scope of implementation of this standard. Okay, and however much it makes reference to the point of scope, to the point of care standard, which is ISO 22367. Okay, it makes reference to it. That wasn't previously a scope, but now it is part of the scope. So it is applicable for both the main lab. So if you have a main lab that you're working, this standard is applicable. If you have point of care sites, for example, at the clinical interfaces, in maternity, in HIV clinics, in art clinics, sometimes people have even different outreaches and they are also used as point of care. So this same standard is now applicable to those areas. Okay, so scope, it talks about the boundary. What does the ISO standard cover and what is not covered in the implementation of this standard? What is directly not covered? Okay, and it might allude to other standards that for this part refer to the ISO for safety. For this part, refer to the ISO for internal audit. So it is not directly giving you the details about those other standards, but it is telling you that if you want to know more about internal audit, go to the ISO for internal auditing, which is ISO 19011. And then we have general requirements. So general requirements is more of what is impartiality, how can you ensure that you provide great services to the patients. So it's more of a patient-centered clause which tells you the needs of your users. How do you address the requirements that are required by your users? And by maybe anybody can unmute and you can tell us, who do you think are the users of the lab? You are free to unmute and respond.
Hello.
Yes, Jamila.
The users include the clinicians, anybody that you request tests to be performed by the lab. That is our user.
Wonderful. So a user can be the clinician who makes the request. A user can be a patient who is a walk-in patient. Okay, because some labs have a provision for somebody to come in and say, can you please do an HIV test for me? Can you please do such and such a test? Users can also be the people that are going to use your data. Okay, which include, like, if you're a Ministry of Health lab, it will include your organizational structure going up. If you're a private lab, Users can also include your management as a facility. Users can also be personnel, because in a nutshell, when you get sick and you're working in a lab, I doubt whether you'll say that I'm not going to be tested from here. Let me go to another lab somewhere. Unless if you know that there are some shoddy business that happen in the lab where you're working. But ideally, you are expected to be one of the users of the services in that lab. Okay, so the users can be different, and clause 4 talks about the requirements of those users. Now, clause 5 talks about structure and governance requirements. Now, this is where the management aspects come in. Okay, what is the organogram, the politics of the lab? All the politics of the lab are covered in clause 5. Okay. Previously, clause 4 and 5 were the second and last clauses of the standard. Clause 4 was management requirements, and clause 5 was the technical requirements. But in this new version, clause 5 talks about the clients. I'm sorry, clause 4 talks about the clients. Clause 5 talks about the politics. Okay. And now we continue to clause 6. Now, clause 6 talks about the resources that you need to run the lab. And these resources can be personnel. So you can unmute and tell us what other resources are needed to run a lab. Okay. Jamila, for you, you've put in your submission. Let the others also put in their submissions. What are the other resources that are required to run a lab besides personnel?
Okay, some of the other things, we need a facility or a structure where the lab processes will be taking place. Then we also need the equipment to run the test, then the reagents and consumables to run the test.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what Eva has talked about is everything that is covered in this clause. So there is personnel. You need people that are going to actually do the actual phlebotomy, they do the actual run around the lab, transfer the sample here and there, do the actual testing, do maintenance, so all the tests that are done in the lab are initiated by somebody. Okay, even if your lab is fully automated, there is somebody who clicks a button and says, let this start working on an automated mode. So you are supposed to have personnel. So what are the requirements for you to run a lab effectively with regards to quality according to this standard? Okay. Then the facilities, Eva has talked about the facilities. Where are you running the tests from? Back in the days, for those that were there 15 years ago, you remember how the lab was back in the days. Okay, you find like a table, put somewhere in the corridor or put somewhere in the back of the back of the facility. So there's a small table and all tests are being done from that table. Okay. So right now the lab has evolved to a place whereby the laboratory has its own structures in terms of infrastructure and facilities. So there's a setup that is recommended by the Ministry of Health. In Uganda, we have the infrastructure guidelines that tells you that if your lab is going to be at such and such a level, at least have one room for testing, have a room for office, have a room for this. So it gives you the different structure requirements that you have to implement with regards to the facility. Okay, and then this international standard comes in and tells you that these are the main requirements that you should implement across those facilities. There is equipment. If I talked about the equipment, they are very important because they're the ones that we're going to use to monitor the environment. We use them to run the tests. We use them to, what else can equipments be used besides monitoring the environment and running tests? What else are equipments used for in the lab? You can unmute and submit.
Yeah, thank you. We can use the thermometers, we monitor them using the temperature logs.
I've talked about the monitoring, so talk about the other uses besides monitoring and running the tests. What other uses can we use for equipments for?
Equipment. Come again.
That what are the other uses of equipment besides running tests and monitoring the environment? Like monitoring thermometer and what temperature and other environmental conditions. What else? What else can we use them for?
What is your
I think they can also. I think they can also be used in terms of ensuring safety for the personnel and the people around. For example, the biosafety cabinet.
Okay, okay, that's wonderful. That's good. So it's very important. Colin, you can now mute. Okay. I hope you are seeing my screen, right?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay. So equipment are important. Other uses of equipment can be calibration. You can use them to calibrate. You can use them to do administrative work like a computer. You can use it to type results. Okay. There are some equipment that are there to provide an amicable environment, like an AC. You need an AC to give you an amicable environment for you to run the samples. Others can be used for safety, for example, a fire alarm or a fingerprint machine, which they call biometric machine. So you can use that to regulate access to the lab. There are very many other uses that you can use equipment for. And as an expert, when you enter a lab like this, everything that is like something like a machine or something that does a job that we as human beings don't do, that is an equipment. Okay? An AC fans the room. You cannot do that. A thermometer measures the temperature. We don't do that. Okay? Javira has talked about storage. Thank you so much. You deserve a hand clap for that. Like fridges, we can use them to store. All these equipments have to meet the requirements in this standard. Okay? Because you might go to a lab and they have this equipment master list. And this master list has all the equipment. And then you ask them, so where is that AC on this master list of the equipment? And they're like, you see, we didn't know that that is part of the lab. It is just something that is, So all equipment have to meet the requirements of this international standard. If I talked about the reagents have to be handled in a way that meets the requirements of this international standard. Okay, and the reagents can be kits, they can be solutions, some people think reagents are only these solutions. For example, field stain A and B. For example, the reagents that you use in ZN, they can also be kits. An HIV kit is also a reagent, okay? Depending on how you are going to define it in your quality management system. Because I'm very sure it is not an equipment. So if it is not an equipment and it is still doing a test, what category does it fall in? It is not a consumable because it is not something that you are using and you are throwing away after you collect the sample or you run the test. It is the one that is going to give us the results. So kits are reagents. So now how do you handle these reagents across the board? Okay. Some people have solutions that they use for disinfection, decontamination, sterilization. All these are reagents. How do you ensure that they all meet the requirements of the standard? So some labs actually make this mistake. They do acceptance testing for the reagents that they're using for the test. For example, we brought our field stain A and we're going to run our QCs to do load testing. Good. And then you ask them, so for this alcohol that you brought, was there a test? Okay. Because you're using it for you're using it to disinfect the surfaces. It's a reagent. When you're just entering into the accreditation pipeline, accreditation bodies are usually lenient because they also want their customers. They want to get more customers on board. But as you go through the cycles of assessment, the harder the assessment come, and then those questions now start coming in. So, okay, you did load testing for your test reagents. Can we see the load testing that was done for these other subsidiary reagents like these disinfectants? What do you do to ensure that they meet the quality requirements of the ISO 15189? Okay, so as an expert, you go into the lab when you have that at the back of your mind, that I'm going to guide this lab to develop a soap for managing reagents, which includes load testing. But then, what reagents am I supposed to capture? And how do we do load testing for the different reagents? Because the way you handle load testing for field stain might be different from the way you handle load testing or quality control, quality assurance for a kit. And it will also be different from the way you are handling a disinfectant. Okay. So it's very important to know the difference between all of them, but at the back of your mind, you know that they all have to be addressed in the procedures and policies of the lab. Then we have clause 7. So if I can recap a bit, I told you there are some clauses that don't change across the different standards. The first one is the foreword. That is the part that talks about the ISO as an organization. The second part is the introduction, which usually talks about, introduces you to the standard. Then the third is the scope. Okay, that is clause 3. It talks about how far does this standard go with regards to the direct requirements that are documented in it. Okay, and then clause 4, I told you, talks about the client. If you have these clauses the way I'm talking about them, they'll be very easy for you to understand and to know which clause is where. So clause 4 talks about the client. And clause 5 talks about the politics of the lab. Okay, by politics, I mean the management structures and everything that has to be in place for you to manage the lab politically. Then we talked about clause 6, which was now the resources that you need to run the lab. And Jamila submitted that one of the resources that you need, you're going to need equipment, you're going to need personnel. Jamila and Eva, they all talk about all these resources. So the resources that you need to run the lab, the reagents, the consumables, that is now clause 6. Okay. Now clause 7, when you go to clause 7, now this is now you getting your hands dirty. Okay. This is now the technical requirements. You're now in the pre and analytical and post-analytical phase. Okay. So you're going to address the pre-examination requirements. By the way, the nomenclature of the standard, it used to use the word pre-analytical before the standard came in. Okay, pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. Those were the old versions of the standard, version 2003 and 2007. Okay. Okay, I think I made a mistake in the beginning. It was 2003, 2007, and 2012. Those were the 3 previous editions. This is now edition 4, which is 2012, 2022. So in the previous versions, 2003 and 2007, they were talking about pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. After 2012, so from 2012 and this one, we talk about pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. Okay. So when you go to certain conferences and certain environments and you see people mixing those two things, you just know at the back of your mind that maybe there is some information that they don't have. The pre-analytical and analytical, that language is no longer used in the standard. We now use pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. Okay. And we are going to look at all these processes in details. So next week, that is when we are going to handle the next clause, which is clause 4. And then from there, with the other week, every week we shall be tackling one clause at a time, and we shall look at it in detail so that you understand the requirement, and then we talk about what is implemented and how can you support the labs to implement the requirement. Okay, so clause 7, that is now the pre-process requirements for the lab, pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. Now clause 8 is the management requirements with regards to the standard. Okay, the reason why in clause 5 I used the word political, I did not use the word management, is because there is this clause that talks about the management system requirements. Management system requirements, these are the requirements for quality, and these ones are adopted from the mother standard. All standards that talk about quality came from ISO 9001. Okay, and the concepts that are covered in all these other standards when it comes to the management system, they are all adopted from ISO 9001. Okay, so to develop this standard, 2 other standards were married together. We have ISO 9001, and then we have ISO 17025. Now, ISO 17025, for those that are already enrolled in the classes, you can see the standard, it is there, and this standard is also there. ISO 17025 also has 8 clauses like this one. Okay, so the one for medical labs was changed and edited to make sure that it meets the structural requirements of its father standard, which is 17025. Okay, so clause 8 in both ISOs is management system requirements. Clause 7 is the process requirements. Clause 6 in resource requirements. Clause 5, that is the organization of the lab. Then clause 4, that is the clients. So that is the structure. This standard was just edited to mirror 17025, from which the technical requirements were extracted, and then the management requirements were got from 9001. Okay. So we are going to look at this in detail, and I hope you guys are going to have a great time. So I would like now to start. And as we are covering this, I wish you can have somewhere where you can write. Like I said, the forward talks about ISO itself as the one that produces this standard. Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, Jamila.
Pardon me, the difference between clause 5 and 8.
Yes. Clause 5 talks about the political structure of the lab. And then clause 8 talks about the management system requirements. Now, the management system requirements are, like I said, the ones that were got from ISO 9001. For example, how do you control documents, document control and record control? How do you do internal audits? How do you do management review? How do you do continuous improvement? How do you handle non-conformities? So all these management aspects of 9001, they were put into clause 8, or previously in the old standard they were in clause 4. Okay, so quality management systems requirements, or the management system requirements, those are like the things that don't require you to be handling a patient sample to implement. However, the ones that are, for example, clause 7, which is like the technical one, where you have to make your hands dirty to collect the sample, analyze it, and then release the result. That is like the technical requirement. And then clause 6, those are the resources. Clause 5, the political structure and the responsibilities of that political structure. Clause 4, it is the client. Okay. Clause 3, terms and definitions. In all standards, clause 3 is the same, terms and definitions. Okay. Clause 2 is the introduction, and then we have the scope. Okay. So if we start with the forward, when you look at the forward, I told you that ISO, as much as some people mistake it to be international standards organizations because they think ISO means international standards, it actually means international organization for standardization. So never be somewhere in public and as an expert they have called you to talk at a conference or to talk at a meeting as the expert, and then you say the international standards organizations. Okay. People will look at you and say, which type of expert have you brought for this meeting? So it's the International Organization for Standardization. It was established after the Second World War because we know how those world wars devastated the globe with regards to the economic structures, political structures, social structures. So this organization was established after the Second World War, after 1945, to put up standardized requirements, whereby if you're in Uganda, whether you're in America, whether you're in Brazil, but you're all doing the same activity, you do it the same way it would be done in across board. Okay, the tools might be different, but at least you would be required to meet the standards to make sure that the product that you're releasing can be acceptable in all those other countries that do the same activity that you're doing. Okay, that was key in driving the global economy because countries needed to exchange goods, they needed to exchange services. So how do you take a doctor who is from Uganda and this doctor is going to work in the United States? Okay, there were some standards that were established. How do you move a patient from Uganda and you're referring them into a medical system in the United States, but then you are saying that they have already received lab services. So how do we know that the lab services they received would have been the same services had we done it ourselves? So ISO standardized the practices. Okay, it was established to standardize practices across all the different sectors. And we are blessed that in the medical sector, the lab, because of its unique nature, because you can determine whether a patient dies or lives. Okay, if you give a patient a wrong result, they can be transfused the wrong blood. If they can get the wrong treatment and they die. They can, there are very many things that a lab influences with regards to patient management downstream. So because the lab was key, we are blessed to actually be one of the first fields to get our own standard in the medical sector. Okay. 17025 was already there for the testing and calibration labs. But then the medical side was the one that got the standard first before all the other sectors got their own standard. So ISO works through a collaboration with other organizations, and I want you to underline and highlight IEC, which is the International Electrochemical Commission. You are going to encounter very many standards as you're implementing ISO 15189 and other standards. So you're going to encounter other standards like 17025. Okay, so for it, it was established by both ISO and this electrochemical committee, and together they came up with that standard. Okay, so that you have to be aware about. It is very important to also note that ISO works through committees. Okay, we call these committees the TCs. Okay, the TC that established the standard for medical labs, it is ISO/TC 212, or you can just say Technical Committee 212, TC 212, and this will be there in your final test. Which committee is responsible for establishing final labs? That is me stealing some exams for you guys. So TC 212 is the committee that sits. It sits regularly. Sometimes the meetings are annual, depending on the schedule that is shared. And these meetings are a collaboration of very many stakeholders. And these stakeholders, some of them include the national standard, the national bureaus of standards in different countries. For example, in Uganda, we have the UNBS, which has a seat on this committee. Okay, there are other organizations through which, if you want a seat on this committee, you can become a member of those organizations. And when these meetings are called, you're one of the members that can go and represent and put in your thoughts. So it is the Committee for Clinical Laboratory Testing and In Vitro Diagnostics. It is TC212. Okay, that is the committee that established this standard. There is another committee which is from Europe. Okay, we know how Europeans can want to be different most of the time. So as the world conforms to ISO, which is the umbrella body of the whole globe, Europeans established their own committee, which is called the chain. Okay, the chain workshop, or it is called the chain committee. Okay, so these ones are also give input into the ISOs as they are being developed. I hope we are together up to this point. So the foreword also highlighted what changed from the old standard to this new standard. And when you look at this first bullet, if you have a standard there, please highlight this first bullet. It was changed to align it to ISO 17025. Okay, like I said previously, we had only 5 clauses. We had scope, normative references, terms and definition, management requirements, technical requirements. But now we have 8 requirements and the structure follows the structure of 17025. So we have the scope, normative references, terms and definitions. I talked about the clients, talked about the political structure, talked about the resources, talked about the processes, talked about the management system. Okay, so that is how the standard is structured, 17025 and the standard. Then it also brought in some requirements from the point of care standard, which is 22870. Okay. And then it also brought in some aspects of the ISO standard for risk management, which is 22367. Okay, and these standards, as an expert, you're supposed to have them. You're supposed to know what they contain, because they're the standards that all medical laboratories implement. So this 15189 might give you some brief requirement, but to get the actual expanded version of the requirement, you have to go into those other requirements. For example, for the other standards, ISO 22870 for point of care has extra requirements for point of care. Okay. 22367 for risk management has an expounded guidance on risk management. However, you can implement this standard without all the other standards. I'm not saying that you need all the other standards to implement this one, but it would be actually good for you to have the other standards, to have them as input into your knowledge with regards to this standard. Okay. And at the end of this program, for those that are in the VIP track, you are going to be required to generate content, which is training content, and it is going to be based on at least one standard that you choose that is implemented in the medical lab. That is for premium and VIP members. So,
I beg your pardon on that.
Yeah, so everybody that is on the premium track and VIP track, by the time we finish this program in 90 days, you should have been in position to generate training content that addresses at least one standard. Okay, so you will choose the standard that, okay, I'm going to go for risk management, and then in the ISO 22367 you are going to generate content for how that standard is implemented. Okay, so at the end of this training, you should have training content of how to implement at least one standard. Okay, which is not this one. There are others that I'm going to put in the list when that assignment comes, and you will choose that I'm going to generate content for this standard and other standards. So that is just to boost your knowledge and your understanding that I shouldn't box myself in 15189 without necessarily looking at the other standards. However, like I said, you can implement it without having knowledge of what is in the other standard. But that doesn't make you an expert. So when you go to the introduction part, I talked about the introduction as the part that now introducing the current standard that you are looking at. Okay. By the way, this session is 2 hours. I hope you guys blocked 2 hours of your time. We are going to end at 6 o'clock. And by that time, I think we should have finished everything from the beginning up to close 3. So the introduction talks about the standard that you are now reading. And I would like to bring your attention to the first paragraph, which says that the objective of this document is to promote welfare of patients, okay, and satisfaction of laboratory users through confidence in your quality and the competence. So that means the reason why labs are implementing this standard is to make sure that our users, who are the clinicians, the staff, the stakeholders, the patients themselves, they have trust in the results that we are providing as the lab. Okay, so that is the whole purpose why this standard was developed, and it has the requirements to implement risk management. Okay, and the reason why it brought on board risk management, because in the old one, risk management was just something small. It was something that was just in clause 414, which only talked about risk management. But in this standard, it was made to mimic 9001, which is a risk-based standard, and 17025, which is also a risk-based standard. So risk in this standard is a big thing. Every clause that you read, think about how you can embed risk management in that clause. Okay, and the reason why risk management is important, because it helps you improve the effectiveness of the system itself. Okay, helps you decrease the probability of getting a false result. Okay, and ultimately, it helps you prevent any harm that might have come to the patient, to the users, okay, to the personnel, to the equipment. So if you use a risk-based thinking while implementing this standard, you actually make sure that you guide the lab to meet all the major requirements. Okay, I'm going to just request everybody to take a 5-minute break as I finish something with regards to this session. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we come back and start at 10 past 5. Thank you. By the way, if you have any question, please raise the question, and then we can look at it in the chat, and then we can look at it when we get back. Everybody stretch out, stretch your arms, do something to exercise at least, and refresh yourself. We'll be back at 10 minutes past 5. Okay. I don't know whether my phone is on that is ahead of the others, but I think we are going to resume. So we're talking about the aspect of risk. This standard requires you to be very, very knowledgeable when it comes to risk management. And that is one of the sessions we are going to look at when we get to week 3 and week 4. How do you make sure that you handle risk management across the board? In most of the labs, when you go to look at their systems, you find that they have put up a risk management program to manage pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. And then when you ask them, so what mitigation measures do you have in place to ensure that there is no stock out? They're like, that one, no, we did not go that far. Okay? There are very many other things that can affect the quality of the results. So how do you make sure that there is a mitigation measure for every step along the processes in the lab? Okay? So the standard emphasizes, like you see the requirements that are in this standard. It has included some of the requirements for 22367, which is the ISO standard for risk management. There was one previously which was 31,000, I think. So 31,000 was the ISO standard that was for risk management in general. But then they decided that, you know what, this is like broad. Why don't we make one for medical labs? So they made one, which is 22367. Okay. I have that standard. If you need it, you can talk to me nicely, and then we can see how to get it for you. And then we have 15190. Okay. 15190 is the standard for safety in medical labs. So you implement 15189 alongside this other standard. There is 2658, which only talks about pre-collection. Okay, so how do you handle the sample before it gets to the testing phase of the lab? So that is ISO 20658. And then it talks about the standard for point of care, which is 22870. Okay. Then talks about 17025, which is our further standard. So I would like you to look at this paragraph if you are looking at your standard or if you are looking at my screen and you're on a laptop. This paragraph, it is a paragraph that tells you that there has to be an ethical framework in the lab that recognizes the importance of quality, especially for giving clients quality results. Okay, and this framework has to address everything from personnel to how the request is made, how the patient is prepared, how the patient is identified, how samples are collected, transported, processed, examined, quality control, stored, results are interpreted, results are released. So this framework is now what we call our quality management system. Okay? When you go to a lab and you are establishing a system to address all those things, that system is called the quality management system. Now, in a nutshell, what is a quality management system? A quality management system are a set of documented policies, okay, and procedures and records that show that the lab is doing its activities in a quality and competent way. Okay, so if you have policies in place, quality management system, procedures that address the policies, quality management system, records that show that you are doing tasks as per the procedures, quality management system. So a group of all those documents together is what we call a quality management system, or that is abbreviated as QMS. Okay, so when you go to support an institution to establish a QMS, what you're just going to tell them, and I always tell the people that I train, you're just going to ask them, so tell me, for example, if you want to get a new supply of ZN reagents, how do you usually do it? Okay, and then the lab will tell you that what happens. First of all, we look at the bin card. If we notice that we have reached a minimum level where we have to reorder, we either the thing has expired, or it has stopped out, or it has reached the minimum. We write a requisition. That requisition is sent to the lab manager. The lab manager approves it. After the lab manager approves it, takes it to the procurement office or to the director, whoever is responsible for approving it. The director approves it. Now this thing is scanned and submitted to NMS or JMS, depending on where the lab is getting its supplies or other suppliers. Okay, different labs have different systems when it comes to handling supplies. So there you are asking the lab, what do you do on a daily basis? And as an expert, now your job, okay, is to develop a policy out of that practice. Are we together? And that policy is going to say that, that policy is going to say that in this facility, all requisitions for supplies are generated by consulting the bins and approved by the so and so, and have to be approved before they are sent to NMS. So that is the policy. So that means that everybody that sends out a request to SMS has to ensure that it is approved. Okay. Now that policy is going to be in the quality manual, but it might not show the details of how it is implemented. Now you go to the SOP, which is now the procedure that says step 1, look at the bin card. Step 2, if the quantity in the bin card has reached the minimum reorder level or the item has stopped out, raise a requisition. Go to book so and so and write these details. Extract that request, send it to the lab manager. So these are the steps that you are documenting in the SOP. Okay, and you're guiding the lab and making sure that whatever they are doing, they already know what they have to do, but what you're just making sure is that you're writing it down so that if Muhammad leaves, and Muhammad was the one responsible for that process, and let's say Maji Richard comes and takes on the same responsibility, he does exactly what Muhammad was doing. Okay, and then now you generate forms that show that, okay, what records do we need to generate to show approval? That one, we don't need something extra. The requisition form is enough as long as the so and so has signed here and here. Then after the requisition, what do we do? Scan the thing, send to NMS. So what do we do after sending to NMS? Okay, how do we now record that this request was sent? So we can say that now we get this request and file it in our records for requisition, so that we show that when the requisition was sent, it was sent according to the policy and the procedure. So that is basically a quality management system for procurement. Okay, and then now you have to make sure that every task that is done in the lab follows the same framework. There is a policy, there is a SOP, and then there are records that show that the tasks were done according to the SOP. Okay, that is what that paragraph says in a nutshell. The standard goes ahead to say that this standard is used to recognize medical laboratories for their quality and competence. However, if you have other services, for example, diagnostic imaging, respiratory therapy, blood transfusion services. I've seen it applied across board, even veterinary labs. There are labs that have gotten accredited to this standard, and they are only accrediting the testing part. Okay, so it can be applied across very many areas. Okay. The last paragraph on this page talks about the two mother standards. Sorry, the mother and the father standard. I always want to call 9001 the mother standard. I'm sorry for the ladies. Okay, please don't get triggered by that statement. But I find the fact that all standards came from 9001 to mean that it is the mother of all standards. And then 17025, I call it the father standard. Okay, just because it is the one that, you know, supplements the mother. Always the guys are there to supplement the ladies. So when you scroll down and now you start the clauses, now we're on page 1. If you're looking at your standard, go to page 1. Okay, we're going to start with the scope. I talked about the scope as the boundary. When somebody opens this standard, what should they expect to be implementing with regards to the direct requirements? Okay, and here it says it specifies quality and competence requirements. So quality, we talked about clause 8, which is management system. Competence requirements are all the other clauses before clause 8. Okay, and then it says it is applicable for medical laboratories and it can be used to confirm accreditation. Okay, this standard is an accreditation standard, but it can also be used for certification. So if I may ask the team, just unmute and submit. Why is ISO 15189 an accreditation standard and not only a certification standard? Okay, because there are standards that are only certification, like 9001. You cannot use 9001 to accredit an organization, but you can use it to certify. However, 15189 is an accreditation standard. Why? Let's start from there. Andrew, you've been extraordinarily quiet.
I'm following.
Okay.
Yes. To me, I think maybe it's because it is basically concerned with the general day-to-day running of the lab that has a direct effect on the quality and the standard of the output of the lab. That is what I think.
All right. Anybody else? Thank you so much, Andrew, for that submission. Anybody else that can supplement on what Andrew has said?
I think this new standard encompasses a lot of things. For example, mainly the three things men have seen: we have quality, competence, and risk assessment, which was not in the previous standard.
Wonderful, wonderful. So why else is it not a certification, but it is an accreditation standard? Okay. Now let me tell you the difference between a certification standard and an accreditation standard. If you have somewhere to write, please write. Okay. As an expert, you're supposed to know this. A certification standard does not have competence requirements. Okay. What it just tells you is that have these policies in place and these procedures in place and these records in place. Okay, that is what we call a certification standard. It does not address the competence specific requirements. An accreditation standard, on the other hand, accreditation confirms competence and quality at the same time. So quality only confirms having system documents and records. Now, quality and competence, you have both system documents and records, but also your practices meet competence requirements for performing the tasks that you are claiming to handle. Okay. That is why we have clauses like clause 7, which talks about pre-examination, examination, and post-examination. By virtue of the fact that it is now diving deep into the practices itself, how do you handle patients in the pre-examination phase? How do you handle the sample in the examination phase? How do you handle the sample in the post-examination phase? Okay, so those are now the competence requirements that are needed for you to release that result and for us to say that your results meet the quality and competence requirements. Okay, so accreditation standards, they have both quality and competence requirements. Certification standards have only quality requirements. Is that clear for everybody?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. So another question. ISO 17025, is it a certification or it is an accreditation standard?
It is both.
It is both. Okay. It has competence requirements. Okay. And another organization can come and say, we want to certify you based on this standard. So it has both quality and competence requirements. Okay. So thank you so much for that submission. So going back to our clause, which is now the scope. We are just finalizing the scope, and we talked about initially when I was starting that now this standard is also applicable to point of care sites. So if you are running tests at the maternity ward, sometimes people run tests at the art clinic, sometimes they run tests from different wards, as long as it is a point of care test. Okay, you have to make sure that the requirements of this standard are met at that desk where they are running those tests in the maternity ward. So in the lab, if we are required to monitor the temperature, in that place where they are doing the tests, the urinalysis, the HCGs for the mothers, you have to make sure that they have a temperature log that is similar to the one that we have in the main lab. They have to have the thermometers, they have to have the storage conditions that are required in the main lab. They have to have, everything has to be translated to those other sites. Okay, because previously in the previous assessments, sorry, just 1 second. Okay, sorry, my computer was threatening to get off. So yeah, previously in the previous assessments, the assessors were not putting emphasis on those other points of care sites. But in the current assessments, when the assessors come to assess, they tell you, take us to the other points where you are running tests in the lab. Okay, so you take them to the maternity ward or to the art clinic or wherever you're running those other tests, and when they come and find that they are not meeting the same requirements that you're supposed to meet in the lab is going to get an unconformity. Okay, so it is very important to know that point of care is now an integral part of this standard. Then talk about the normative references.
I have a question.
Yes, Jamila.
I have a question.
Yes.
In summary, meaning the process requirement, it is the competency bit of this
In summary,
Hello?
when you talk about
Is
process,
the process,
okay, we
process
talked about,
requirement, is it the
mm,
competency part
yeah, so we talked
of
about
the
the process
ISO?
requirement. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. First finish.
Okay, I was asking,
Mhm.
according to all these clauses for this new ISO, is the
Mm.
process requirement the clause for competency and the rest are for quality?
So there are two clauses that are competence based, and one clause that is sorry, and the others are quality based. Okay, you can call resources and which is clause 6 and 7. You can call those two competence based requirements. Okay. The reason why we can call those competence-based requirements is because when you look at the other standards for quality only, they don't address those areas. Okay. So in a nutshell, there are some aspects of clause 6 that are quality. There are some aspects of clause 6 that are competence. So you can do clause 6 as a blend between quality and competence, but clause 7 is exclusively competence. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So basically, clause 6 and 7 are the clauses that are going to talk about competence, and then the other clauses, they are mainly the management requirements. But we don't want to lump them like that because there was a reason why it was structured the way it is, and we don't want to now deviate a lot from this current structure. So let's take them as the way they are. But at the back of our mind as experts, we know clause 6 and 7, they are the competence requirements. Then the other clauses, they are the management requirements. Thank you so much for that question, Jamila, and for that observation. Now, a normative reference, in a nutshell, is a document that was used to derive a document, or that was used to come up with a document that you're talking about. Okay? And for this document, there are some normative references here. You can look at the guide 99. Okay? You can look at ISO 17025, which is the one for calibration labs. Then you can look at 17000, which is the vocabulary and general principles that is used in 17025 for calibration and testing labs. So these were used as a basis to implement. In the implementation. They can, I mean, you can do away without them, but you just know that all the information that you're handling in your current standard is derived from those other standards. Okay. So for those that know the GUM, which is ISO guide 99. Okay. It is the GUM, it is the guide to uncertainty of measurement, which is ISO guide 99. It is one that tells you how do you ensure that you keep a track record of your uncertainties in your lab. And like I said, the standard is risk-based. One of the main tools for risk-based practices in the lab is measurement of uncertainty. That is why it is actually used here as a normative reference. Okay, and as we move, we shall look at uncertainty measurement, and we shall see how now this standard, the GUM, or the guide in metrology, powers into the lab's measurement uncertainty practices. Terms and definitions. In the terms, we have the first term as bias. Okay. Anybody can tell us what bias means according to you? If somebody says there is a bias in this measurement, what do they mean? If somebody says there is a bias in measurement, what are they talking about? Yes, Colin.
Yes, thank you. A bias can be loss of confidence in the person that has done something, like a certain procedure or the results they have provided. If they have lost the trust in what you are giving them, then they will be biasing everything you'll be doing.
Okay. Thank you for that submission. Who else? Let me
Also bias.
Jamila, first give room for the others.
It's fine. It's
I'm going
fine.
to select. This time I'm going to select Udaya Nalwega. What do you think bias means in this case? Okay, I can. Joseph, you can give Udaya a hand in case she's not on the microphone. Joseph.
Yes. Uh, for me, a bias is like the extent to which someone might think that the reflected outcome is not true because of maybe contributing factors to because of the process it went out.
Okay. So I'm going to rephrase what Joseph has just said. Okay, Joseph, you can mute now. Bias is the difference between the actual value of a measurement and the lab value. So what you've measured and what the actual value is, that is what they call a bias. Okay. So for example, if the hemoglobin is supposed to be 6.5 and that is what actually is in the blood of that patient, and your machine measures 6. Okay, so the bias is 0.5 because it would have been 6.5, but because of those other reasons that Joseph has talked about, your machine has seen 6. Okay, so this difference between two measurements, one is the actual, one is what you have measured. This difference is called bias. Okay. When talk about biological reference intervals, as an expert, there is some nomenclature that you're not expected to use. Some people talk about biological reference ranges, and that is a very wrong statement if the context you're talking about it is the context of intervals. Why? Because a range mathematically is the difference between the highest and the lowest measurement, right? So that means a range is one number. However, according to this international standard, we use intervals because you're talking about the highest limit and the lowest limit. And these limits are the limits of a normal population, not the sick population. Okay, so the example I gave about hemoglobin, if you're talking about the biological reference intervals of hemoglobin, okay, there is the lower limit for a normal person, which is a male person. It might be, let's say, 11 for a certain population, 11 grams per deciliter. And then the highest for a normal male is 17 grams per deciliter for that population. That means that if we get anybody below 11, we consider them having low hemoglobin or diseased if the conversation is about anemia. Or we can say that they have their hemoglobin count is above the normal, and then we can look at the causes of having high hemoglobin. Is it polycythemia? Is it other causes? Okay. So biological reference intervals is used and not biological reference range. Okay. Remember that because in the lab setting, especially for clinical trials, they use the word ranges so much. Or clinical labs or research labs, they use the word ranges. But in quality management system, we use the word interval. Okay. And then here in the definition, it says a specified interval of distribution of values taken from a biological reference population. The key word about that statement is that biological reference population should be the normal population. So if you're establishing reference intervals, all the participants have to be normal participants, not participants that are attending OPD. Okay, I went to a certain lab and they had done this experiment of verifying their reference intervals, and it was really a good thing, and I really appreciated the effort. But the only bad thing about it that gave them an unconformity is that they did not get the readings from a normal population. They got it from the people that came to attend OPD. So we cannot use that as a reference interval. Then we have clinical decision limits. Okay. Now, this is a result. And if you have a standard there, please highlight or underline this part. A result that indicates a higher risk of adverse clinical outcomes. Okay. So a decision limit, for example, for hemoglobin is that lower limit, because when somebody goes below it, we say that they have anemia. Okay, and there are other decision limits that go beyond low and high, or normal and pathological. Some of those other limits are what we call the critical values. That is also a decision limit, because when you go below the critical value, it means that now the clinician has to do something urgently to address your condition. For example, they might have to infuse you, and yet if you had not reached that critical point, maybe they would have told you, please change your diet, okay, or get some supplements for hemoglobin. So depending on the condition, they would manage appropriately. Okay, so always remember, clinical decision limits are that point of a result that reflects a higher risk of adverse clinical outcomes. Then talk about commutability. Now, commutability in brief usually comes when we're talking about calibration. Okay, and in this way, we are talking about closeness of agreement between two measurements. Okay, we can talk about it during calibration, we can talk about it during IQCs, because I'm going to give you a scenario. Most of the IQCs that we use, let's say for CBC, they are not got from human blood, because there is no person that you're going to bleed to get a human sample that you use as your control material for your machine. Okay, otherwise we wouldn't be having blood in the blood banks. However, what manufacturers do, they get other matrices that are similar to the human whole blood content. Okay, for example, they can get blood from horses, they can get blood from crocodiles. Okay, most of our materials are blood from horses and crocodiles and avian blood. So they get those matrices, and we use them to run controls, and they tell us whether our machine is reliable. Okay, so now the aspect is, are those matrices comparable to what a human blood sample would get? Okay, if it was an IQC material and we're using human blood, and we are using, so we have human blood on this side and crocodile blood, how close are these two materials to one another with regards to giving us the degree to which a machine is reliable and accurate? Okay, so yeah, so it can be two matrices, it can be two equipment that are doing the same test. Commutability is just talking about closeness of agreement between two measurements. Okay, and then talk about competence. Competence in brief: can you apply the knowledge and the skills that you have to run that sample? Can you apply the knowledge and the skills that you have to maintain that machine effectively? So competence is looking at two things. Okay, knowledge. Do you have the knowledge? And when you're doing a competence assessment, you have to assess those two things. You assess the knowledge, which means you look at, do they know the procedure? Do they know the SOP? Okay, and then the skills is now putting the SOP in practice. Okay, so we judge those two things. Usually we look at the knowledge, and the knowledge can be done maybe giving somebody a test about a soap, or you give them a test about, a procedure. But then when it comes to the skill, you are observing them run the actual test, or you're observing them maintain that equipment. Okay, so do they have the knowledge and the skills? That is what competence talks about. So if your system can address those two, it means your people are competent. When it talks about complaint, okay, this one was not there in the previous version. It is a new term. It is the expression of dissatisfaction by any person to you as the lab, okay, with regards to your practices or your results. And the key thing here is that if somebody complains, you're supposed to respond to their complaint. Okay? Very many people fall short and they get non-conformities in their complaint resolution process that they do. They get a complaint. So a patient comes and complains, I came yesterday night, there was no person in the lab, and yet you guys say you are a 24-hour lab. Okay, we have received that complaint, great. So we do a root cause analysis, and we find out that the person on night duty maybe, we do our root cause analysis and find out what the cause was. And then we come up with a solution, and we say that for everybody that is on night duty, we are going to have a night duty roster. Okay, and then in case somebody raises a complaint about, let's say 3 consecutive complaints, you are going to face disciplinary action. So we have put measures in place to address that complaint. Now the key thing is that you are supposed to give feedback to the complainant, because a complaint or information, there's somebody who is giving the information, and then they're supposed to give them feedback. So in case there is no feedback, the lab might get an unconformity, or in case there is no means, because maybe somebody raised the complaint, but they did not record their phone number. However, there was a provision for them, but because they feared to be penalized, because some labs, when you come and complain, they don't give you the services. They say, so people fear. Okay, so if there is a provision and somebody doesn't record their number, that's okay, but at least we should have a system that captures how we give them feedback. A consultant, which you are expected to be at the end of this program, is a person who provides expert advice. Okay, so you guys are going to provide expertise with regards to quality management system. Examination. We are all lab personnel, and we know that we are obtaining a value, whether it is descriptive or it is a numerical value, but we are trying to obtain that value from the sample that we are analyzing. Okay, now those are the examination. Everything that you do to obtain that value, whether numerical or descriptive. Numerical can be 10 grams per deciliters of HB. Descriptive can be HIV reactive or non-reactive. Okay, so everything you do in that process is what they call examination. Then we have a procedure, which is now the documented steps that you undertake to obtain that value. Okay, that is now the examination procedure. Talk about EQA. EQA is the evaluation of participants' performance based on a criteria. Okay, that was established, and here you're using interlab comparisons. So by interlab comparisons, we mean there is a reference lab that prepared the sample, and then it gave you the sample, and that reference lab knows the value. So which means they are analyzing your results based on their value. or it can be an EQA, which is based on a group consensus process, whereby they send out samples to different people, and then they get their means. So if you are closer to the mean, it means you are accurate. If you are far away from the mean, it means you are not accurate. Have impartiality, we shall look at it more when we get to clause 4. Interlab comparison, this one we shall look at it more. There are some things that I don't want us to concentrate in this first phase, but we are going to look at them when we reach the individual clauses in more detail. Interlab comparison and internal quality control, we shall look at them when we get to clause 7. There's what we call in vitro diagnostic device. Okay. This is a device, whether used alone or in combination, obtained by the manufacturer for in vitro examination of the statement derived from the human body, solely or principally to provide information for diagnostic monitoring. So we all know that all devices that we are using in the lab, the IVD devices, right? Because they are trying to mimic what the condition would have been in the body, and then they are trying to run the tests out of the body. Okay. Together. Then we have laboratory management. This is a person or persons. So it can be a group of people that sit together to form what they call lab management. Okay. You have the lab user, which is an individual who can be a patient, a clinician, anybody that is using the medical services. A management system is a documented way of doing things. Okay, that is what I talked about in the initial presentation. You have documented the way that you're doing things in terms of policies, objectives, and procedures. Okay. Now, when you add quality to that, you are doing what we call a quality management system. Okay. And by adding quality, we mean that now there is a standard that you're using as a reference to document what you're doing. Okay. So quality management system, there always has to be a standard involved.
Yes.
Okay. Yusuf, can you please mute? Okay. Accuracy, we talked about bias. Bias and accuracy, they are used synonymously. Okay. If you hear the word bias, you heard the word accuracy. Measurement uncertainty, we shall look at it more in detail when we get to clause 7. Now let's look at a medical laboratory. A medical laboratory is an entity that is used for examination of materials that are got from a human. Okay. And these materials are either going to provide diagnosis, monitoring, management, prevention, treatment of disease, or any other function. Okay. So if you're talking about a human being, that is a medical laboratory. We're talking about animals, that's a vet lab. But for human beings, it is a medical laboratory. Now, somebody might ask you, what is the difference between a research lab that handles human samples and the research lab that handles veterinary? Is that a medical lab or a veterinary lab? So I may ask you guys. A research lab that is handling human samples, and it might either be also handling veterinary samples, or it might be only handling human samples. So what is that lab? Is it a medical or it is veterinary? I can give you an example of the Uganda Virus Research Institute. It handles viruses that are zoonotic, both in human and animals. So it handles both animal samples and human samples. So what type of lab is that?
Can I try?
Yes.
It is a biomedical lab.
Okay. Daniel, do you agree?
Can't it be a research lab because it is handling both animals and humans?
Uh, Collins is saying that can it be a research lab because it's handling both humans and animals. So yeah, it is a research lab. Okay. And that research lab has a medical component and a veterinary component. That's what it is. So that means that if you are accrediting it, you can accredit the medical side using this standard and the veterinary side using the standard for veterinary. I don't know whether my sound is still audible enough. Am I audible enough?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we have point of care testing. These are tests that are done near the patient. For example, you've taken this testing to maternity, to art clinic. Douglas, I'm going to give you a chance to talk. Let me first finish these few terms. Then we have the examination, and post-examination. All these we are going to tackle them when we get to the individual clauses. So we shall still come back to look at these terms. But the one that I wanted to end with is turnaround time. Now, turnaround time is very important for a lab to find what turnaround time is for that lab. Because for a certain lab, it might be the time between collecting the sample and releasing the results. For another lab, it might track the time that the patient gets to the lab to the time that they leave to go back to the clinician. So another lab might track that we are, as soon as we receive the sample, we don't look at when we have collected, but have we received it? So we track from that point onward. So it is important for a lab to specify those 2 points. Okay. Between pre up to post. So ladies and gentlemen, we have finished the first part of the standard. I'm going to request every one of you to talk about that aspect of the research. Is it a research lab or is it a vet lab? Is it a medical lab or is it a vet lab? When it comes to standard, you can post feedback in the WhatsApp group, and we can have other discussions in the WhatsApp group. So Douglas, can you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you. What I wanted to say is exactly the same thing that you said we can discuss in the WhatsApp group. I wanted a clear differences between the biomedical lab and the research lab, because if maybe, as you said, if the human samples are being run in that particular labs, and maybe the animal samples are being run in that particular lab, but not for the purposes of the research, can that lab still be called research lab? For me, I thought it can be like a biomedical lab, not necessarily a research lab. That was the only submission I wanted you to clarify. But as you said, we shall discuss in the WhatsApp group. I think we shall brainstorm there. Thank you.
Okay, my brother. Collins, you have to say something.
Yes, thank you. I had asked in the comments whether you will be able to share.
Sorry? Okay. We can use equipment. You'll be able to share the document you have displayed for personal revision. So by the time Collins, go to your course. You are going to get this document there. It is there, the material.
Yes, of course.
Premium weather documents are there. Both standards are there, 17025 and 15189. Okay. In case there is any other issue, let's now take the discussions to the group, because I don't want to. I know everyone that has attended this call is a very busy person. I know each and every one of you. At least we have interacted somehow, and I know how your schedules are, so I don't want to hold you any longer. We are going to have an assignment that we have to submit before end of next week. Is it next 25th? So in 2 weeks' time, we should have submitted that assignment. It's about goal setting. The submission box is already open. You go to your track and you'll find the submission box there. We are going to have the next session Thursday next week. It's going to be 2 hours, and we're going to look at clause 4. It is a very brief clause, but we are going to look at it from A to Z. I want by the time we finish each clause, we have dissected it, we have performed surgery, we have put it back together, and then everybody knows exactly what to do when they go to different types of labs or different contexts of labs. Okay. If there is nothing else, I would like the president to give us a closing remark. It's Eva on the call. I can't see the participants from here.
Yes, I am on call.
Okay, wonderful. Please give us a closing remark and then we can close the session.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Mulindwa, for taking us through the session. It was really a very nice one. I like the fact that it was engaging. Members kept on bringing out their issues and seeking for clarification whenever there was need. You were audible enough and really explained most of these terms and the forward of the standard really nicely. I have really nothing much to say but to say thank you and to thank the team for coming online and having this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. See you in the group. We can discuss further. Thank you.
Mulindo, you're muted. Muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I was saying that everybody, thank you so much for attending, and we're going to take the discussion now to the group. Thank you so much.